So part of the problem with recording metrics and outcomes is that you actually have a balance between what the researcher has to do and what staff needs to capture for their reporting needs. So in SmartSimple, one of the things that we try to do is simplify the reporting process and make sure when people are entering their metrics, it's in a very systematic way. And a nice way to do this is when the person logs into their portal, they can continually update their projects as those metrics are being attained. So if I log in as my researcher, on the landing page, I can see that there are several items that he has to proceed with at this point. So I have several different reports that are due. I have, say, 6 active projects, and I have several proposals that are being submitted or under review. So if I looked at my list of active projects, I can see that this guy is a PI, so the principal investigator on a couple of these projects, and then he's got some projects where he's a co-applicant. And since he has visibility to all of these different projects, he can go in and update any of them and add his different achievements. This gives you an advantage because then when the person logs in, they can just do one update in one place. So if I go into this one project, I can see that there's an overview of what the person submitted and say perhaps a list of all the different team members that are involved in this as well. Now on the left-hand side, I've got a list of project metrics. So he's been updating this as he goes along. And this is a nice way to not just wait until the annual report or the quarterly report, but to make sure that he logs in and as those publications come through, he can brag about it to the funding agency, and in turn, the staff can promote it as well. So I've got them categorized in several different tabs, and these tabs, as you know, SmartSimple is very flexible and you can adjust these as needed. So the first tab, I've got a list of publications, right? So these would cover, say, journal articles or books or other types of theses. And then I've got this broad category for achievements where the awards, any conferences that the person has attended can be captured as well. And then I've got an IP tab where a person would enter in any invention disclosures or say perhaps some patents that he's generating from the funded project. And then, for people who are creating companies and sort of on the far side of the funding spectrum, you can enter items that are related to the different company generation. And the last one is around highly qualified personnel, or say if you're counting FTEs on the project that are being funded by this particular project. So you would enter in these different individuals. So let's go back to the publication tab and talk about how you would enter in this data. Because some of the problems with entering in line item data is that it's really tedious for the researcher. And we've made it very easy where you enter in a new publication and we search PubMed for it. So if I enter in a keyword or perhaps a title of a publication and click search, then I'll get the list of publications that are related and select these for importing into SmartSimple. So I would add them, and I would have an opportunity to further define any additional fields that would be important for staff to capture. Because sometimes you want to have a little bit more definition around the actual journal article, not just the information from PubMed. So say if you've had some co-funding, that would be identified with this as well. And I would create those records and then they would appear in the database underneath the project metrics tab under the publications. So now if I want to add some different achievements, I would go in and create a new achievement record. And since we have the advantage of having a drop down with all the different types of achievements, someone can go in and easily identify what type of achievement it is, and perhaps for an award, enter in some basic information, and then for, say, a collaboration, require more information. So some of the problems with capturing this information on an ad hoc basis is that you don't get the level of detail that you need. So for example, you actually need to identify what scope it is, if it was a provincial collaboration or perhaps an international collaboration, because these are, when you're looking at these metrics, you want to make sure that you're identifying really high profile items that are coming from your funded projects. So the other nice thing is that when you put a date on it, right? So when you put, say, a term, you can sum up the international collaborations, for example, over the year or over the number of years of the project that's running. And if the researcher has any questions, there's some nice tooltips that are available in SmartSimple that helps them direct on what type of information they're going to capture. And because you're actually defining the fields that are required here, so anything with the asterisk is a required field, and you give them some optional fields to add more details if they want to. So you kind of have a balance between the owner entering data on a line item basis on the researcher side and what you actually essentially need on the staff side. So let's go back and examine the IP tab. So under the IP tab, we can add different IP. And when you're selecting, say, an invention disclosure, there's a very minimal data set that the person has to enter in. Whereas a patent would actually want to have more information, whether it's in a provisional patent or perhaps something that's awarded, what country it was awarded in. And then the fun thing with SmartSimple is that when you have, say, a record for each one of these different patents submitted, this could trigger a workflow in the background where it would notify, say, your commercialization officer that a new patent was added to the database, and the commercialization officer can follow up with a researcher and talk to them a little bit more about their disclosure. Also under the Project Metrics tab, we've got an opportunity to collect data about the individuals who are funded by the projects. So if I look at this one particular individual, I can identify their name if necessary, and more importantly their role, because eventually you would want to say over a certain term you've supported this many postdocs, this many graduate students, you've got this many clinicians on the particular projects that you're funded. Often people would like to know whether there's a job that was created because of the project, and they would enter in their joining date and finishing date so that you can actually calculate the FTEs that is over the duration of the project. And in this way you can actually say to your stakeholders, we've generated a certain number of jobs and we've supported this many people in using our funding. So if I log in as a staff person, I can see an overview of what's coming through all the different applications. But if we're looking at metrics, I have a nice report where I've identified the publication count, for example, and I have the list of funded projects for this term, and I've got a total number of publications for each one of them. So for this one that we were just entering in some data, they have a total of 14 publications, and they actually have one from Nature and one from Cell. And you can actually see over your portfolio the number of publications that have been generated. And you can further define these, of course, whether it's a journal article or a book or a thesis, and then do a total count of the high profile ones so that you can start to promote your funding to others.